Hey, welcome everybody to today's training. We're going to do one on indexer basics. So here in the picture is a ShopBot desktop, but what today's training will do is show these indexers, which are an attachment that can go to any size ShopBot, new or old, and what we'll do is look at this rotary attachment that bolts on to your ShopBot. And what we'll do with this training is we'll talk into the ShopBot software, how do we set this up, in the Vectric software, how do we set up our job setup for this, and we'll look into some different things with rotations, different mounting options for the different machines, and just overall what is indexing. So this would be an intro video to get you going, turn some simple projects using the Vectric gadgets, and then you can get into doing more by adding 3D. You can turn different spindles and stuff that's off round, and there's some amazing things that you can do with the indexer. But sit back, and then for today's training we'll get you going. We're cutting your first couple projects here using an indexer attachment on one of your ShopBots. Thanks. Well, looking at some indexer basics here, what we can see by these three examples are taking a traditional turning and being able to use this fourth axis, which is really another motor that is added to your ShopBot, as we're able to stop the rotation and bring our bit down and do the cutting in different increments around the 360-degree rotation. So these are three neat examples here where the chisel handle at the bottom is something that you traditionally wouldn't be able to do on a lathe that's just constantly spinning. The middle one there, you see a gun stock, which the ShopBot will rotate that as it needs to come in from the top and cut it. And then what we'll be looking at is the simpler project here. This is a wooden mallet that will have some video of it cutting throughout the next few slides. So there's just showing you a few different things that you can do with an indexer that traditionally you wouldn't just turn by hand on a lathe. So just to show you here is a buddy in the picture, ShopBot buddy, that has a indexer mounted to it. So all the different ShopBots will accept these. And just so you know, there are different size indexers that we sell. We stock a 3-inch, a 6-inch, and a 12-inch, and that's the diameter of the stock is what that will take. So depending on the size of your machine is what size indexer you'll be able to use. That's something you'd call in and talk to sales about, and they'd fit you for your machine. And again, depending on your machine is also where you'll mount it, which is what we'll look at on the different slides. But just so you can see, there are different size ones, and that has to deal with the diameter of the material that you can turn. And then length of it, well, that again depends. The length of your turning, that would depend on the mounting of your indexer and the size of your machine. So that's something you get specific in when you order the thing. So here's a couple of different ways to attach the machines. What we'll be looking at in the videos today, and what we first saw is up here in the upper right corner is a ShopBot desktop with a 3-inch indexer, and that's mounted just by putting T-nuts down into the aluminum rails and then sliding the headstock and the tailstock to different distances and tightening them depending on the stock that's being used. Very easy to mount. What we're looking at down here is an older PRT, this bottom picture, where they have taken off the back side of their PRT and mounted their 6-inch indexer back here. So what we'll be able to do is still have your full 4-foot by 8-foot cutting surface, and then what this does is it travels back because you still have an extra set of inches back here that you can move around to. And currently this is our production tool in the back shop. It doesn't have the indexer on it right now, but when we do, just so you can see, is we will sometimes take and bolt it right here to this aluminum rail. So we'll have the tailstock and the headstock up here on the side of the rail, where then the spindle will come over and then cut down on it. Also, just keep in mind along the back here, yes, we have an automatic tool changer on ours because this is our production tool, that we need that setup. But a lot of times that's just referencing what you're seeing here on this PRT, is there's another 8 or 9 inches back there for you, for your gantry, the beam here, and the spindle that go back there, and if you mounted it along where those automatic tool changers are, that's another great option to have it, which stays out of the way of your main cutting surface. So it's going to take a little planning on your part to get it the way you want it, but that is some different mounting options for you. What we're going to look at here is we're going to jump ahead and show a indexer already mounted on it and see it in action. And then we're going to come back and look at both the ShopBot SB3 software and the Vectrix software on how to set this job setup up. But let's, something physical here, just look like setting up on a lathe. Is, we're chucking it up, we found the centers of our blank, we're getting it in there and we're getting it tight. So again, depending on what you're doing is your mounting options, but remember, this thing is spinning and you want to make sure it's on there and it's secured. So just to show you a close-up at the end here, you have a 3-jaw or a 4-jaw chuck that comes with it depending on the size. And depending on the size of this, the turning that you're doing, you can either come from the inside like done on this video with the jaws, or the jaws can grab from the outside. And then here again is the other center where we're going to bring it in to support this, the dead end. So tightening that down and securing that stock. So that's what we'll do. Basic like a lathe is setting that guy up. The next thing that's basic that we do is along the same lines is zeroing the cutter. So when we're in the software, it's going to ask us if we'd like to zero to the top of the material or if we'd like to zero to the center of the material. Again, depending on what you're going to do is where you'll set this. But I'm holding the 0 plate there steady enough for what I'm about to cut. That way I can use the bit to zero off the top of this turning. So nothing new so far. We bounded the indexer to our machine, we chucked it up, and we zeroed the Z. And then again, we're going to next look into the drawing software and the control software about zeroing and setting up a job file. So notice from this here that we just zeroed it to the top of the material. And also, for the way I did this particular file, is I zeroed my X and my Y right here at the center of the spindle. So right along the center of that dowel is X0 running all the way down, and Y obviously is perpendicular. But for this example that we'll see in the drawing is 0, 0 for X and Y is right here along the center of that spindle, and then we zero the Z to the top of the material. Next, we're going to look into setting up the CAD file. Whether you have VCarve Pro or Aspire, which are both the Vectrix softwares that are available through your purchase of a ShopBot, you'll be able to do wrapping, is what this is called in the software. With the Aspire, obviously, you're going to have a lot more options with doing 3D turnings versus VCarve Pro with what we're going to do here is just a simple turning. But just so you know, there's these two softwares that will both work for doing indexing. There's a gadget menu off their webpage too that lets you download different gadgets, which we'll look at for helping you with turnings. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go in, we're going to set up a job setup, how we would do this so we could create one. This will be done using the gadget. We have to find a post processor now that works for the ShopBot. When this thing is done with drawing and it has to be calculated to code, it has to be processed in a format of what it's about to be applied to, whether it's a ShopBot, PRT, whether it's a ShopBot Alpha, whether it's a ShopBot Alpha with an indexer or air drill. So it's just what helps with the converting of the code so the ShopBot can read it. And then again with this we can preview it in 3D and make sure it's what we're looking for. So with that being said, I'm going to open up a new version of the VCarve Pro software here, and instead of creating a new file, I've got this dowel right here. I come up here to gadgets underneath wrapping, which is what we're going to do. We're going to wrap stuff around a cylinder. I go to the wrapped job setup. And here is a fill-in sheet where pretty much I come in and find the size of the material. My dowel I measured is 15 inches long, and the size of it is 1.95 with the calipers, is the diameter, is the thickness. It's a 2-inch dowel, didn't exactly measure out right, so I want to make sure I get in there the size. I am working in inches, And now is where I need to look at my machine. How did I set up my indexer? How is it mounted to my table? Am I going to be wrapping along the X or the Y? So it gives you pretty good pictures here showing if I have this first option picked, the X stays long and it's going to wrap around the Y values. So the way we have this mounted on that ShopBot desktop is across the 24 inches in the X. So that part needs to stay to a length. What we need to figure out is how to wrap this. And what this is going to do is figure out the circumference for you by using just this diameter. Where did we zero it? In the video we just saw we zeroed it to the top. You do have the option of zeroing it to the middle. And then again, down here you have the option of simple or spiral, and you can get into spirals and more advanced stuff, but to keep this tutorial basic, we have just typed in our length, our diameter. By the mounting orientation, I'm going to wrap my Y around the spindle. And I'm going to keep this a simple wrap with 0 on top, and by clicking OK, it just created my job setup. And to verify this job setup, I see that I have a 15-inch long in the X, and now I have a 6 and approximately an 1/8 in the Y, which would be if we unwrapped that outer layer and laid it down on the flat, because we will be drawing it in flat still and then wrapping it around using the software. And let's just do something simple to keep this along the lines. Is if I came in and I wanted to wrap some text, say around a cylinder, I can bring in my text, and since I know I can wrap it around something with a ShopBot, instead of just having it straight across, why not put it at an angle, and we'll increase it a little bit and see if we can't wrap this around a cylinder. So nothing new so far besides using the gadget to set this up, and nothing too new over here so far. I just want to V-carve this in with a V90 bit, whichever V degree you want. I'm going to calculate it. I previewed it. Okay, nothing's new, but I do want to see what this thing looks like around a cylinder. So, excuse me, to do that, I'm going to make sure I have this thing selected, and I'm going to come up here to preview the toolpath drawing. And which way did I wrap this? I wrapped the Y values and the X stayed long. Okay, so there I'm starting to see it. With the VCarve Pro, you do have to turn off a few settings to be able to see this right, and draw the material block. And here we're seeing now what it's going to do in 3D. The red is the machine not cutting, the blue is showing you what it would be cutting down into, and again there is our retract in the green. So same sort of preview. You can come in here and play around with the different views and the different options of laying this out, but that's something to mess with. You can see what it's about to do, and the key to this over here is the biggest thing is post-processing this out. We see that we have a V-bit text wrapped around the cylinder. If I was just to come over here and save this toolpath as a SBP file and go cut it, we're going to have a little bit of an issue. So what we have to do here is we have to save it to a post-processor that is set up for an indexer. And the way these machines come is you have just your inch and your millimeter processor, and most of the time that's all you're using. But now you start getting into advanced stuff like indexing or air drills or automatic tool changers. There's other processors that are available. So to find that, first of all, let's just save this file. I'm going to save this file because we need to close all versions, and we'll just call this one ShopBot text wrap, so I can find that on my desktop. And I need to make sure that I can close this out afterwards and make sure it applies. But what I'm looking for under here, under File, is I need the Application Data folder. And if I open that up, here is searching all the way down into Windows to find the VCarve Pro files where they're saved. And underneath Post P for post processors, I look and there's that TC inch and that TC millimeter that we saw a minute ago. But underneath Old Post, look at all these other ones here we have. These are for ShopBots of different eras, ShopBots with multiple heads, dual Z's, air drills, tool changers, and what we're looking for here is here's an indexer X and an indexer Y. Well, we wrapped ours around the y-axis along the x, so that's the one I need right there. And if you're going to do a lot of indexing in different directions, you could go ahead and put both of them in there. But so I don't confuse myself, I know that's the only one I need. I'm going to copy that one, go back one folder, go into the post P where you are right here, and just paste that in there. And there it is. And let's just see, if it has not shown up over here yet, we'll exit the software and start back depending on your version. But I look in here and clearly I just need to reset my software. So again, I want to make sure I have this saved. I will exit out, and then now I'll open up another I'll open up my vCarve again, and there's that ShopBot text wrap. We just did it. And to come over here, I should now have underneath post processors, which is the little 3.5-inch floppy disk right there. I click on that, and how do I want to output this? I want to output this to a ShopBot indexer. So now I've selected the right post P, I've got my vCarve, and by clicking save here, we've now made it ready to walk out to the machine and run this file, with it being zeroed to the top of the material, and with this type of post processor. Refer back to my video before. It doesn't matter where 0 is oriented in your drawing for your X, what it will do is it will be over the center of your part. So, and again, this one is where it's nice to always go out right now and do an air cut for what we're going to do. But we would save this, and we would next run our file, which is where we'll go here next. Well, let's take a look at the ShopBot software now. Well, what we need to do in here is change some settings so we can display that we're working with an indexer. So a few things that need to be looked at is displaying the proper axes, checking on the speeds, the rotation, make sure you can turn it on and off. So I will open up my ShopBot 3 software, and here we normally see X, Y, Z is what our position is, but we need to get to the B axis, which is what the indexer runs on, is the B. So to display more of these, what I can do is go up here to display my values. So values, display values, or you could type in VD for values display. And what we see here is right now we're only looking at 3 axes, our X, Y, and our Z. So to get to B, I need to change that to 5. And you'll see why, because there's X, Y, Z, A, B. So that would be a full 5 axes there. And notice that the B says DEG for degrees. All these other ones here are moving in inches, where the B is measured in degrees. So the other one to look at would be the value. You could do a VS or a MS to come in to find speed values. And what I'm looking here is the B move speed, which right here is at 50. And now this is measured differently than these, which is inches per second. This is measured in degrees per second. So that's why it's a lot higher number right there at 50. So just so you see that one. Another thing that's really useful is you can go MI over here, and MI is where you can move the indexer to turn it on. Make sure it's going clockwise or counterclockwise. You can program the speed, and by clicking right there, what I've done, and if it was hooked up to a camera, you would see that my indexer is now just turning. It's just constantly spinning. I am hooked up on a simulator right now, so I can't function that properly, but you would see just the indexer spinning around. I can also hit Control I, which Control I shuts it off. As you can see, the number has changed and shut the machine off. So you could also, MB, and give it different degrees on what you'd want it to spin. Have the thing turn all the way around. So there's you can play with it right here in just the control software and make it move, make it spin, make sure it's going in the right direction. So that's to get you set up in the ShopBot 3 software. Now that we've got the machine hooked up, we looked into the CAD software, the control software. Let's run this with the file. So this first one is, I verified already my rotations, my speeds, my zeroing, and now what I'm doing is running down the different profiles for this mallet. So as you can see, there's different options on how you want to, if you know which way you want to do an offset or a raster. You can add ramps just like you did before. It's just running right now a pocketing toolpath wrapped around the axis. So that one was going around the diameter. Now this one here is using a ramp as it plunges down in, and then this one's going to work by indexing it a couple degrees over as it goes back and forth. So now I'm going back and forth along the cylinder versus wrapping around it. So you got different options for the approach you want to do depending on obviously the material that you're cutting. And again, this is a simple thing here, just doing different pockets of different depths. But you know what we'll build into is showing you a few different options that you can do. The next one here is what we drew, which is the wrapping of the text. So here is using that V-carve toolpath after it had been pocketed down to the correct diameter for the handle of that mallet, and now we're V-carving the text along the side of it for that. So there's a form of wrapping right there. And again, with that post P, it allows us to come in there and wrap that around there, and it takes this simple flat toolpath that we just drew in our Vectric software and now make it something that we can wrap around. So let this finish up. And this is a local organization here in the Raleigh area called Able to Serve, and we were very fortunate enough to work with them and build some stools and mallets to assemble the stools. So there's a form of wrapping text. Also right here is more wrapping options. If you look again in your Vectric software underneath gadgets, you will have all these different options of doing flute parameters, twist, wraps, and spirals. They're all in there underneath gadgets. And to keep this training to the basic of setting up an indexer and cutting, I will leave you with these as saying probably your best option to get advanced on these until we get more trainings of our own up with the indexer is just like I had learned how to do it using the software. I went right to Vectric's webpage, and underneath support I found the one on wrapping where they explain each one of these in depth using their Vectric software. And that would, if you want to get good at doing this part of it, I would recommend watching those videos, because that's exactly what I did, and it got me cutting and spinning and doing good with that. So with that being said, really you've got two good options here. Underneath the Vectric's tutorials, there's the rotary job setup and machining. You get tutorial files, the videos that explain those tool paths more. So if you're having troubles with your tool pathing, I would definitely recommend here. If you have some problems with getting your machine turned in the right direction or getting the speeds right, that's where it's best to come to our webpage and ask for the support, put in a support request for that. Well, you will find yourself, as you start playing with this more, here that I took that simple hammer, and instead of having the straight handle, as we went, we said, hey, let's give it contours. So look more into the Aspire, where you can start adding 3D and building off these simple little curves, and now going in and getting and doing stuff that normally you wouldn't be able to do with a traditional lathe. And to wrap that guy up, you saw the simple hammer here that was done originally, and then how we went in and started making modifications to it. To down below, using the Aspire software, you see a full model of a car being carved out. So what we looked at here was mounting. You got to figure out how you're going to mount it to your machine. Each and every one of us is different with what we're going to be indexing, so that's something you got to think about. Zeroing it is just like what you do with your normal stuff right now. If you zero it at the same place as you do in the software as the machine, you'll be in good shape. When you're in with the Vectric software and the CAD stuff, use the gadgets. They'll really help you and make this really easy for you. It's just fill-in sheets. It makes it so nice. And remember, you got to get the right post processor for this. You're processing out to an indexer now, and make sure it's the X or the Y. In our control software, make sure you've got the settings right, the directions. You're displaying what you're doing. And as you start doing these simpler things, you're going to find yourself advancing and building into doing more stuff, where you might use now the Aspire to do these 3D models and add extra detail to your project. So this was one of hopefully many to come, and enjoyed everyone's being here today, and I thought this was a real good intro to using a ShopBot indexer on your machine. So thank you very much, and everyone have a great week and holiday season.